Welcome to the Soul Archaeology Podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Soul Archaeology Podcast. I am actually recording this on the Venus Cazimi, which is when Venus is conjunct the sun. And it's a very, very powerful, potent day. And I'm going to talk all things Venus Retrograde today because that is something I'm seeing surface in all of my sessions, in my life, in my friends and family's lives. So I know that relationships and money are a huge focus right now. Aren't they always? So this episode will be launched the day after the Cazimi, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what it is in case that you were feeling this activation quite intensely on Sunday as well. A Cazimi is essentially when a planet is conjunct the sun. And the sun, we can look at it as sort of the king, and it amplifies or activates or empowers anything it touches. And that can empower both the light and shadow within that planet, that whatever it's activating within us, whatever it's amplifying within us can amplify, our wounds, and it can amplify our spaces where we're feeling more empowered. So as Venus and the sun met today in the sky, the conjunction happened. Venus essentially is receiving an injection of light, blessings, empowerment by the sun. And what this does in our own lives within us is it activates, amplifies, illuminates the lessons and learnings we've been navigating and excavating over the last 2 weeks. So this Cazimi, this conjunction with the sun, really strengthens Venus, who is currently retrograding, and offers insights into what's coming up for us. I've really experienced it as a huge heart opening. It's the point where we begin to reset our relational framework, which is something I've been talking quite a lot about over the last few years. But this inward process that we're all on, experiencing, needs to be taken into or applied to connection in order for us to really grow and evolve, shift in the way we're meant to in this life. And so, of course, the relational work, the connective work, is where we receive so much data and insight into our own processes, our own patterns, the things we're here to shift or learn or integrate about ourselves. And as we grow and shift and evolve, our relationships inevitably do too. So as we shift and change, our frequency shifts and changes, and our sensitivities shift and change as well. We become more sensitive, more attuned to our own internal landscape and what actually feels right and good for us. Any of the patterns that we have in place that are perhaps not serving the types of connections we're wanting to invite into our lives. Truth, honesty, deep, heart-centered connection requires radical courage. It requires, deep introspective work, but also courage to show up, to soften the ego, to acknowledge the ego, to be able to acknowledge and accept it, and to share that with the other person, and to move forward in love. And that's where the real transformation occurs. So we've had a lot of different transits, especially over the last few years, that have really brought us deeper into our relational work. I really think the nodal transit through Taurus and Scorpio was extremely activating for our connections, because it required the work on our survival systems that inevitably impact our relational framework, how we relate to people, our attachment systems, how embodied we are, how connected to our bodies we are. All of these things are really lay the framework for connection. So this really deep underworld journey we've been navigating with Scorpio, the Scorpio South node, has been in a lot of ways preparing us for heart-centered connection. And I do believe, because all of this is divine, it's all aligned, it's all happening in our favor. And so I do believe this Venus retrograde we're currently navigating is in many ways sort of a refinement of the work we've been doing. And I do find Venus's retrograde the most fascinating and juicy of all the retrogrades, although we certainly feel the outer planets retrograding because they sort of affect big themes in our lives. Like we have, currently have Saturn and Pluto retrograding, and those are certainly felt. But the Venus retrograde and something like a Venus or a Mercury retrograde, they're inner planets, so they're a bit closer, and we can feel and touch those shifts more intimately within our own lived experience. And so a retrograde is essentially an underworld journey. It's an opportunity for us to reclaim, revisit, dig deeper into our depths in order to access and retrieve parts of ourselves, insight, clarity, things that we didn't quite see the first time around. Retrogrades are super helpful, although I think they have some fear attached to them. I know certainly I still have some of that within me where I see a retrograde approaching and I'm like, have a little bit of like the aspect of me that's fixed, my Pluto and Scorpio and my fixed rising. I don't love the idea of this whole overhaul that I have to experience all the time. And so when I see retrogrades approaching, I have a little bit of hesitancy, but then I immediately remember that they're here to support. And I do believe all of these transits are here to really support our evolution and our growth. And so the energetics behind a retrograde are, of course, the underworld journey. So things go deeper. It's a subterranean process. And when I look at the energy, I always use the metaphor of sitting on a boat, and if the water is choppy and you're sort of just seeing the choppiness on the surface, and you're just kind of on the boat, sort of surviving, holding on, and all of a sudden everything becomes smooth and the surface of the water becomes smooth, and you can see all the way to the bottom, and you notice what's there that you didn't notice before. You notice that there's life at the bottom, that there's perhaps coral or fish, and that's similar to a retrograde. The current of life slows, and we can witness our depths more intimately. We can see what's down there. It brings forth opportunities to have that reflected to us. So in retrograde periods, I feel like we're more attuned, we're more sensitive, and we can sense our activations, our patterns more intimately, which is super helpful, because if we're just kind of moving through unconsciously and sort of stumbling through life, we don't get the opportunity to rewire some of these patterns, some of the things that we came here to learn. And so retrogrades really slow down the energy enough for us to get it right. Not that there's a right or wrong way to do this, but it's an opportunity really to reflect enough to notice the truth of the situation. So when we look at the planet Venus represents love, connection, how we give and receive love, our self-confidence, our desires, money, creativity. All of these things are connected to Venus. So that's where we see this energy manifest in our lives. And then what you want to look at is where Leo lands in your chart, and that's where it will be housed within your life. So Venus is currently retrograding through the sign of Leo. The last time we had this specific transit, which was different, of course, because other planets were in different positions, so the energy wasn't exactly the same, but this specific retrograde through of Venus through Leo happened in August of 2015. So a beautiful practice at this midway point of this Venus retrograde, which began on July 22nd and is ending on September 3rd, is to take a moment to reflect. What were your big lessons and learnings around creativity, love, connection, self-confidence in 2015? I know it's a long time ago, and so many of us are just completely different people. I can't even believe how different I am now than I was in 2015. It's incredible to think back to that period of time, but really looking at what lessons were you navigating, what areas of your life were being impacted or activated, and comparing that to now, what's coming up. I have a feeling it might be similar. And that's the beauty of a retrograde period, is it provides us space to reflect, to reclaim, to redo certain things. If you were navigating a lesson in 2015 and you perhaps have some remnants of that lesson surfacing for you right now, this is such a huge opportunity to reclaim that part, to rewire that experience within you. The incredible thing about an underworld journey is that it is designed to provide space for us, a roadmap to reclaim parts of ourselves, to create more wholeness, more embodiment in the next phase. And it's a transformative process. When we land at the bottom of a descent of an underworld journey, we die. Parts of us die. And it's in the moving upwards, the ascent, where we bring with us our reclaimed parts, our wholeness, our new aspects into our lives. We can apply it then. We're rebirthed into this new chapter. And so when we think about Venus and we think about Leo and we think about where we're at currently in this evolutionary process, with sort of at the threshold of this great new beginning with Pluto moving into Aquarius in January, we are refining our relationships. We're refining our relational framework, where and why we attach in the way we do, how our egos play into our connections, where we're perhaps hiding parts of ourselves in order to feel safe, what our nervous system is telling us, the tricks we can oftentimes play thinking that our heart is open when it's actually closed to connection, any avoidant patterns we have that keep us cut off from authentic big love. So we're right at that point, the bottom of the descent, where we can really, it's almost like the light gets turned on. And I always say to my clients, I can feel when they're at the bottom of their descent. And it's that part where you sort of disintegrate and you're just surrendering, essentially. You're surrendering to the transformative process, to the powers that be, which are having its way with you, which are forcing this, incredible alchemy to occur. And that's the point where the magic happens, when you surrender to what's occurring right now with this Venusian energy we're experiencing. When you allow the heart opening to happen, when you lean into it, that's where the magic occurs. That's where the light turns on. It's almost like a light bulb turns on and everything becomes clear. And that's really what's happening with this Cazimi, is the light. The sun is illuminating what we need to see within our lives. And this will kind of continue on with us through the next few weeks of this retrograde period. But it's a really powerful week, especially with the new moon in Leo that's coming up, to get very clear on what exactly our patterns are that we're dissolving, or the parts of us that we're integrating right now, where these patterns originate, because they all originate from an aspect of us that didn't receive something it needed to in that time. Whether it's a past life experience or trauma, or a childhood experience or trauma, or something we've just carried into this life through our ancestry. If you are evolving, if you're moving through your own internal alchemical processes, you are inevitably navigating that work in your connections and your relationships too. And this retrograde through Leo is not letting us hide. It's not letting us hide due to insecurity or due to fear of rejection or loss or abandonment. Leo is big love. It's big energy, and it loves the sun. So this is an incredibly auspicious day and is also activating. I've been feeling today just super high, beautiful, expansive openings, new beginnings, positivity, optimism, but I've also feel a lot of grief, and that's really normal. I always think that, when we're in these big transformative processes or we're crossing a threshold, it's so normal to feel grief, because we're not just, creating something out of thin air. We're going through the cycle of death and rebirth. So there's always something dying as something's being birthed. And, for myself, I'm at this really interesting threshold of closing, a big 15-year chapter, just like everyone, with Pluto closing its transit through Capricorn, but also really reckoning the parts that I'm leaving behind, or I should say the patterns I'm leaving behind, and integrating the parts where those patterns originated, and working through a lot of attachment patterns. My dog Arlo if you don't know, is my soulmate and has traveled with me through this life for almost 13 years. He'll be 13 in September. And he has been one of my most precious guides, companions, and has taught me so much in my life and on this path, and has been the number one heart opener in my life. And he's, of course, he's a big boy. He's a big golden doodle boy. He's or as my dad would say, a Sumerian sun dog, because I got him 13 years ago, before golden doodles were really a thing, and my dad just couldn't say golden doodle for some reason, so he called him a Sumerian sun dog. And so he's my big Sumerian sun dog, and he's, nearing the end of his life, and it has kicked up so much for me, so much around my attachments, my codependency, he's been my co-regulator for 13 years and one of the only safe connections I've ever felt. So it's been very illuminating for me over the past year to start to peel back those layers and ask questions and look at why, and how can I shift that moving forward? How can I use his love to transform me, to crack me open more instead of contracting through the pain? It's like opening to the pain. So that's been, one of my big journeys through this year in particular. And today I just felt it open. I think grief comes in waves and emotions come in waves. And today I just gave myself to that wave, and I just allowed it to have its way with me. And I felt the beauty in the grief, which is, I think I'll do a whole episode on grief, because it's something that I just find to be one of the most wild, incredible, painful human experiences, but it ripens us to life's preciousness and the finite nature of this existence. So I kind of got off course there, but yeah, in Leo's my midheaven, so it's been obviously this retrograde has been transforming my work and making me look at the ways in which I do hide or I withhold. I'm meant to be seen in my work. It's, Leo's my midheaven, and so I'm meant to be seen. And so I'm reckoning with that and allowing myself to open my heart to all of you on this podcast, which feels like the most safe space to do that. And I'm grateful for those insights, but I still am noticing, even in friendships and connection and in my partnership, the ways in which I hide. My ego protects me from rejection, from abandonment, from feeling pain. And that's really what all of these patterns do. They protect us, So I invite you to take some time this week, especially with this new moon in Leo that we have on Wednesday, to reflect on any ways in which we withhold our love, any ways where we hide, any patterns of low self-worth or low confidence that are keeping us disconnected from the love or connection that we seek. Take a look at where Leo lands in your chart, and that'll show you where Venus is currently retrograding. and where you can perhaps reflect on what's coming up in your life and apply it to this specific retrograde. And I want to talk a little bit about the symbolism behind Venus retrograde because it's so fascinating, and there's so much history and myth around Venus herself. And her retrograde is really seen as her metamorphosis from an evening star to a morning star. So she essentially disappears from the sky. And this just means that, when she's usually visible in the sky in the evening, a bright planet. And during this retrograde period, she actually she rises in the morning. So she's essentially disappearing. She's not visible in the sky any longer for this period of time. And that represents, her underworld journey, her metamorphosis, her reclamation of her parts in her descent. And so a new version of herself can emerge. So that's symbolic of our own experiences now, this process of going through our descent into the underworld to reclaim the parts of us that need more attention, more love, more awareness, to allow ourselves to fully transform so that we can move into deeper heart-centered connections, so we can move with less fear in our lives, whether it be around money or relationships. And one of the myths or stories around Venus retrograde that I love and I always think about during this period of time is the story of Inanna, which is a Sumerian goddess who represents fertility and abundance and love. She's essentially the counterpart of Venus. And the story is about Inanna's descent into the underworld, which is essentially an allegory of Venus's retrograde. And I'm going to distill this into a very short version, but you can always read more about it by just Googling it or getting a book on Inanna. And specifically, it's so fascinating, and I really love learning about the different gods and goddesses. But the story essentially starts with her deciding to go to the underworld to visit her sister, who was the goddess of the underworld. And, to the Sumerians, Venus going under the horizon or disappearing under the horizon meant that she went to the underworld. And she passes through 7 gates and has to remove a piece of clothing or jewelry at each gate. Which is essentially, symbolic of our process of shedding or letting go parts of us that are inauthentic. This in the underworld, we shed things and parts of us that are no longer serving, things we don't need, things that, are attached to our ego in order to emerge more authentic, more whole. And so she goes to these 7 gates, and then when she arrives in the underworld at the bottom, her sister actually kills her. So this is the part where Venus is conjunct the sun and a new Venus cycle starts. So, it's symbolic of the underworld journey where we hit the bottom and a part of us must die, we must surrender a part of us in order to move through and emerge more authentic. And so it's so interesting that her sister represents essentially our shadow side, the part of us that we must learn to integrate. And then Inanna is rescued and resurrected. She emerges from the underworld, rebirthed new, in a new state of being. And of course, that's symbolic of our own underworld journey too, emerging anew. And this journey is very much a feminine one. It's an introspective, inward journey to access the patterns within us that keep us disconnected from our own hearts and therefore the connections that we seek in our lives. And so Venus retrograde really is a journey to our heart. And so we look inward. There's this introspective nature to this journey of looking inward to access and find anything within us, any wounds, any patterns, the survival tactics that we've created to keep ourselves out of our own heart space where so much is held. I think in many ways we disconnect from our hearts because it holds so much information. It holds all of the grief and the sorrow and the pain that we haven't felt safe to process, haven't been able to be present with, to witness. And this is really a journey, an opportunity to go into those spaces, to witness those parts, to love those parts, to let those emotions come forward. So it's a really incredibly powerful time. And as we know, the integration of self, which is the process that I practice, is first looking inward to reclaim our own parts, to transform our own inner landscape, to return to our hearts so that we can move through the world more embodied, more whole, more in our higher alignment. So there are so many biblical references, of course, to the 40 days and 40 nights, but this story of Inanna is one I really love and resonate with as well. And it's Venusian, which is the essence that I am, it's the medicine I practice, and it's heart medicine. So the card I pulled for you all today, the oracle card that I pulled from the Untamed Elemental deck, which is the deck I'm including in my giveaway, is, believe it or not, the Divine Feminine card, which is so aligned given what we've just talked about and discussed, the journey of Inanna. You just can't make this stuff up. So I will read it to you now. As the breath of the untouched and the bearer of wilderness, she is the Divine Feminine, eternally in service to everlasting beauty. The sacred polarity between the Divine Feminine and the Divine Masculine is responsible for the totality of existence and lives within each of us, regardless of how we identify ourselves within our own body. Her role is the unfolding discovery of the heart merged with the purity of her counterpart's ever-evolving wonderment. Divine Feminine is ceremonial in bliss, a consecrated womb of no thing from which all things are born. She is the mystery, the void, the abyss, the ecstatic fulfillment of worlds, and the absolute essence of the universe. Divine Feminine announces that something is ready to be fulfilled. Divine Feminine is the voice that assures you will have everything you need to develop and birth your vision, dreams, and desires. There is no better time than now to declare your resounding yes to the creative endeavor that is calling your name. When it's balanced, you experience openness to fulfilling divine inspiration and ideas. When it's imbalanced, you're stuck in false perceptions of inadequacy or lack. And to bring into balance, begin the creation process even if you feel frightened. So I love this because Venus represents creation, creativity. It represents money. And so much of what I'm seeing is like, this axis of work, money, and relationships. So all of this creative energy is a theme too. So it's a really great time to just kind of look at what are you being called to birth and how can you lean into it? How can you just begin or start to lay the framework for what you desire to create, what you are creating already within you, knowing that it's already existing somewhere. It's simply time to align your frequency with it. So starting to incorporate your creations, everything you desire into your daily life is something I talked about in another episode or definitely on Instagram. So lots of nuggets of wisdom within that card pull today. And my poem for you today is not actually a poem, but it's an excerpt from a book that I dearly, dearly love and cherish by David White called Consolations. And I highly recommend this. If you're not familiar with David's work, he's one of my favorite writers, and it's just always brings me into such a deep experience within myself every time I read his work. And so considering we're working within Leo season, courageous, heartfelt, heart-centered work. I'm going to read you something from his excerpt about courage. Courage is the measure of our heartfelt participation with life, with another, with a community, a work, a future. To be courageous is not necessarily to go anywhere or to do anything, except to make conscious those things we already feel deeply, and then to live through the unending vulnerabilities of those consequences. And I love this because we just talked about the courageous journey of Inanna into the underworld, and our own courageous journeys into our heart space, into our underworld, into our depths. So I hope that you were able to pull some insight and perhaps clarity, some nuggets of wisdom that are resonating within you and that you can apply to your own current experience. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the giveaway before I leave all of you. To celebrate the launch of Soul Archaeology, I am hosting a giveaway, and this giveaway includes a free session with me, as well as a gift box of incredible goods from some of my favorite makers, dear friends, Earth Archive, which is an incredible rainforest oil that I use on my face, and it's so luxurious, so Venusian, it's like pure gold. An incredible ritual spray from my friend Keiko at Golda Life, with my friend Eve, who collaborated on the scent, and it's incredible Heba wood oil that is such an incredible cleanse. I use it around my crown when I'm working with people. The Untamed Elemental deck, which I've been pulling from, which I love dearly. An incredible ritual bath soak from Commune here, my dear friend Erica, who lives in the canyon as well. And last but not least, an incredible Herkimer Life Force necklace, a Herkimer diamond necklace. And it's the same necklace I wear every day, and I have worn every day since 2019. And it is one of the most incredible activators for my throat chakra. And I'm actually having Becca from Pound Jewelry on the podcast next week. She's such an incredible fairy earth angel. And the story of starting Pound, which she runs with her mother and her sister, is such an inspiring one. And Becca's wonderful. So that is also included in the giveaway. It's such an incredible box of goodies, and of course a one-on-one session with me as well. So to be entered to win the giveaway, I just ask that you subscribe, rate, and review on Spotify and Apple. I know you can't leave a review on Spotify, but you can rate it. But you can leave an actual word review on Apple, which is super helpful for me. And then also sharing an episode on social media and making sure you tag me and Soul Archaeology so I can see that you shared it. Otherwise, I won't be able to tell that you completed it for the giveaway. Thank you for being here, for your presence, for your courage. I know this is big work. You've got this. We've got this. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I'm sending lots of love to all of you.